So welcome to the Network Yourself to Success podcast. I'm happy here to be today with Beeny Rubinsetin. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnny. How are you doing?
Great. I'm amazing.
Excellent.
So basically, I'm very happy because Beeny is really has a lot of experience both from the corporate but also from the startup world. He's been the Microsoft Azure founding team member, 15 years in Microsoft corporate, has been building sales team globally and been really in the management part, and also you've also been in the startup world, and you know everything about sales, business development, and corporate and networking in that sense. So I want to give it to you to introduce yourself a little bit more, give a little bit of elaboration, and where you're sitting today, of course.
Thank you so much, Johnny. First of all, I don't know everything. I don't think I'll ever know everything, but I've made enough mistakes that I can share a lot of lessons learned here. My name is Beeny Rubinsetin. I'm originally from Brazil. I have a bachelor degree in computer science, computer engineering from the Catholic University of Rio. I moved later on to the US, where I got my MBA at Wharton Business School. Joined Microsoft first time back in 2001 in the corporate headquarters in Redmond. Started my career in global product management, initially on the developer tools division. I was responsible for Visual Studio. Had lots of different roles. I won't bore you with my whole career at Microsoft throughout 13 years. Eventually, I became part of Microsoft Research, and I was part of 2 or 3 different incubation initiatives around software as a service and cloud computing. Back over 10 years ago, when that was a real novelty. Eventually, I resigned from Microsoft in 2014. I was at the time the CMO for the cloud business in the US subsidiary, and basically became a co-founder and managing director for the first partner of Microsoft Ventures, or now Microsoft for Startups in Latin America. So we basically built from scratch an accelerator for startups. We actually built a fund, and when I say we, it was myself, a few other co-founders, and we had in our board as also investors, Microsoft, Qualcomm Ventures in Latin America, the government of Rio, and a few other local VCs. So we did that for a few years, invested in about 12 Israeli great startups. Some of them we helped come to the Brazilian market, such as Taranis in the agricultural technology space. We're the first investors also on a company used to be called Common Sense Robotics, now called Fabric, which is doing amazingly and competing with Amazon, believe it or not. And so after all that experience, I think my passion for Brazil was huge. My passion for Israel screamed a bit louder. And eventually I married an Israeli and also moved to Israel. And we've been here since 2016. For the first 3 years, I was back at Microsoft. Was actually part of the Middle East and Africa headquarters, officially based out of Dubai, United Arab Emirates. I did quite a lot of traveling throughout the Middle East and Africa, and built, as you mentioned, a new sales organization for Microsoft, also for Azure, but really focused on what's called today digital transformation and vertical solutions for transforming certain industries. I left Microsoft in 2019, worked actually as an executive at a clean tech startup here in the north part of Israel, and eventually decided to take a different path. I've been actually working mostly independently as a strategic advisor for several artificial intelligence startups, and also for some corporations in Brazil and abroad since then.
Okay, great. And so throughout your whole career, obviously, you also seem like that, right? You seem like a people's person. What is your take on networking and the power of building relationships to get business to reach business goals and reach success? What is your perception of that?
Yeah, I like the question. My answers are not the most conventional ones. What you see is not what you feel or what it is. But although I guess I'm Latin and I talk a lot, every psychological or leadership test that we took at Microsoft, personality-based, I was in a small corner of the introverts. And everybody who knows me is like, "Ben, you're in the wrong corner. This is the introvert side." And I said, yes, I'm an introvert. So what it means is that for me, originally it wasn't so natural to, as you say, I'm very people oriented, but I was really about the depth and the quality of the relationships and not so much about the breadth. And that was both good and a challenge, as you can imagine, as you are in a global corporation managing multiple partners and customers. I had my circle of very, very deep relationships, but I wasn't very, I was definitely not a master on broadening that skill sets. I think that started to change a bit once I moved to the US and joined a business school at Wharton. I built a global community of MBAs that we're in touch for 20 years now. And there's lots and lots of things that I both learned and practiced to do that. But to give you just one tidbit, which sounds very corny and cheesy and basic, but to me it's something that people actually take for granted and don't pay enough attention to. I think especially in times of pandemic, the job market took a hit. Of course, we moved from 5% to 20% of unemployment in Israel, for example. It's natural. It's Darwin. People need to survive. They need to get a job. They need to get their income, their parnassa. And we tend to look at people on how can this person help me, right? And I'll go, hey, Johnny, I know you have this podcast. What should we record me that I'll become more popular or whatever that is? And there's nothing wrong with that. Human nature is based on survival, and we have to be selfish at times. But that doesn't help us actually networking. Like nobody really likes. There's a key word that I learned in this journey, especially in Microsoft transition lately with Satya Nadella, which is he brings a lot of the mindfulness concept and really the word is empathy, right? Honestly, I wasn't very empathetic at the beginning of my career. I was building teams that was like, I got a quota, I got to win my bonus, I got to get the Gold Star Award, I got to do whatever it takes. Not that I was doing anything wrong or unethical or illegal, of course, but you're looking for yourself. And the real great salespeople, the great networkers, it took me a while to learn that I had great coaches and great trainers, but they genuinely care about others. Like they would really look at you and try and find ways to help you. They'll try to find ways to bring you value. And by doing that, it's not only an altruistic act, it's also a selfish act. Because if I really help you, you're going to value me much more. And you're more likely to have a long-term relationship. And you're more likely to help me when I need your help. So it's a give and get. And, one of my favorite professors from Wharton, Adam Grant, is now very famous. He's
very. I mean, one of his books is one of my Bibles on give and take.
Exactly. And again, it's a very simple, basic principle. You can learn it from the Torah. You can learn it from business school. You can learn it from whatever you want. But to be honest, it's a tidbit that I think fundamentally transforms the way you network and the way you see those relationships.
So that's great you mentioned that, and that's also, it's true that you hear it all the time, but it's the challenge in this is like it's against what do you call it, nature, in the sense that usually to spend a lot of time on nurturing and fostering a relationship with long-term goals, right? Because you don't see the goals right now. And you said, as you mentioned, as a salesperson, you need to finish your quarter. You can't deal with. I remember I also worked in sales once, and it's like 6 months, 9 months sales. Okay, you should keep in contact with them, but you have to focus on the accounts that can close this quarter. So it's kind of like but in one way, I'm really satisfied that you say that the greatest salespeople, they know how to do that. But it's very difficult intuitively. It goes against your intuition that you have to focus on long-term satisfaction and hold off something that's short-term. How do you do that? And also, you take it for granted that, again, you basically, when you say you give a lot to other people, you don't know if there's ever going to come anything back in that sense, right? So how do you know who to focus on and who not to focus on, you could say?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And as I said, not everything is so intuitive and straightforward. But as I said, I think, my experience, was in multiple different sales organizations, both in Microsoft and outside. And what we experienced, also relating that a little bit with the evolution of technology, is that just to pick up, the traditional models, not only for Microsoft, but as an example, when I was back, in 2001, when I first joined, I was actually not in sales. But if you looked at that time, Microsoft and most companies, with the exception of the ones called born in the cloud, like Google or Amazon, they had servers and they had products that needed to be sold and deployed. And, you'd bring an army of consultants from Accenture or Capgemini or whoever, and this was a process that would take a couple of years. And what I'm saying with that is the skills of a sales guy at a time, or sales girl, to be more inclusive, was mainly around very large, complex negotiations, but it was very transactional. Meaning, of course, customers want attention, but if I'm negotiating with bank XYZ and I have a multi-million-dollar agreement for the next 3 years, I'm going to spend 6 months, and that's what I did also when I was working in the UK, nailing down that deal. Because if I miss that deal, that means my family will not get their bonus, and we're not going to get our trip to Hawaii, whatever, when I go in the end of the year, right? So those skills were actually, by design, very short-term oriented, because I really need this deal closed. Now, fast forward, 10, 15 years where we are today, Microsoft went through this whole transition to the cloud, which means not only we had to convince customers to embark, the entire company had to transform itself. I had to build, literally in incubation mode, new incentive models that, now it's obvious Microsoft has a lot of resources they can put on their own. But when I was building the first sales team for Microsoft Research in the health space, we were selling a cloud platform, and it was before Azure even existed. And we didn't have the right licensing, and we didn't have the right incentives so that the salespeople would say, okay, by selling this, Beeny, we are also helping ourselves because we'll make more money. It was the opposite. I would travel to Canada and UK, and the countries I was trying to launch the platform. And while my corporate vice president was puzzled, why is it that those people are not delivering? There's 20, 30 sales, but they can't sell it. After building a real trust with them and spending time on the ground with them and having, not only the business meetings, but the shisha sessions at 10 p.m., we realized that they said, Beeny, I got to tell you something. This is very strategic for the company, for a CEO, whatever. It sounds great, but they're looking at their stocks vesting in 5 years. I'm looking for my next quarter. By the way, I don't get any bonus if I sell this. As a matter of fact, you are competing with me. You're an internal competitor for me, because if I sell your thing, I'm going to sell less of my products, which I have a quota for, and the budget for the customer doesn't increase, which means you are actually jeopardizing my ability to hit my quota. And that was a moment of aha, and I had to go back to corp and bring some empathy and say, guys, let me give you some bad news. We're not aligned to the subsidiaries because they're not only not making money on us, they are losing money on us. So that's a clear reason why they will not collaborate. And after the initial shock, they really understood. And I said, it's not just about being good friends. It's that I built a strong relationship with them, but I can't do that without an alignment and incentives. So now what I told you, this longer story to illustrate is, today, fast forward, at the time, no one in the company had a quota to sell cloud products. Today, everyone has a quota to sell Azure or Office 365, whatever that is. And those sales are not the large old sales that you close and you come back in 2.5 years just to make sure everything's fine and renew it. You have to make sure they actually not only buying it, but they're consuming it, because now you pay as you go, you pay as you use it. If I sold you a license of Azure that I sold in day one, and after 11 months you realize I'm paying $50,000 in my bill, I don't know why.
And Amazon has something better, or there's so many competitors on the market. That's what he's saying.
Right, and plus, again, you're selling a platform, which means you can do anything with it. But when you can do anything with it, it's also likely that you will do nothing with it. Yeah. So unless you actually sit with the customer and understand the real pain point, you understand the industry, you understand the challenge, you understand their KPIs, because your KPI is that they will consume your product or your service, but they have their own KPI. They have profitability, they have whatever, churn. And if you're not really directly helping them to achieve those, they will give up on you. And so today, those relationships, they have to be, and we had to retrain the salespeople, and we had to also change some of the salespeople who wouldn't change or be adaptable, because those guys need to be real trusted advisors to customers. They can't be the pushy guy who just want to force a contract through their throat. Yes, they still want to sell, of course, but they need to be what we do call consultative sales. They need to go and add value. They need to actually leave the meeting by the customer saying, I learned something new in this meeting. This guy is helping me, before you even try and do a commercial agreement. So it's a very, very different kind of sale.
And that's also the growth of customer success, customer success relationship management, right? So you have this new position that's, especially in Israel, is really, really being popular, and it's a lot of need of it. So basically you have the sales, you're closing the sales, and you have the post-sales, who making sure, checking in all the time that the customers really know how to use and having success in using the product.
You're right, and to be honest, I think it can't generalize, but one of my observations is, for example, when we were on this journey at Microsoft, initially we didn't have a customer success unit. So we had different roles that would actually close the sales, what we call pre-sales, And we had some people that, of course, would support later on, but mainly those people were more technical. They were like technical support kind of people. And I see that model.
Right? Reactive and compared to proactive.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that's very common. There are a few companies in user one name that I think really nailed what customer success is about. But if you just browse LinkedIn, you see this post, and they basically treat customer success people and have friends who are customer success managers as technical support people, and those are very different functions. And eventually, the customer success, as the name says, is to make the customer successful, which means not only solve technical problems, they need to make them get the value and want to buy and consume more, and that requires also business skills, not only technical skills.
But you feel that is basically just reframing an old concept that's always been there, and say you said Microsoft, you've always been using that kind of mindset anyway, and now it just became like a position in itself, a whole career in itself.
Absolutely, and that's why, for example, I don't want to pick myself as an example, but many other companies have similar ones. I was doing benchmarks against many other players in the industry, but Microsoft, there's very well defined. There are groups, for example, called the accounting unit that's more in terms of the actual relationship with the customer. You have the specialist team unit, which is more around really understanding the products and the technologies, and you have the partner team unit, which focuses on the partnership. So those teams have multiple roles between them. Some more active in the pre-sales, some more active in the post-sales, some more technical, some more business. But as a team, they all collectively own the entire cycle for the customer. It doesn't end on the sale. And that needs to be a lot of orchestration. Again, we're talking about a large corporation, but think of it, we were building this team. We started as 6 people worldwide. That was one of those 6. And now, of course, it's thousands of people. But even in a startup, it's the same. I worked for a startup here in Israel, and we had one customer success manager when I joined. And my mission was to double the revenues of the company. So initially, I had a mandate to hire a bunch of salespeople and just go and aggressively hunt new customers, which makes sense. But then I realized by spending 3 months and saying, look, what happens to those large customers that were closed a year, 2 years ago? They're not getting much more value out of these services. They may churn. And if they churn, one of these customers that churn is way worse than just missing 1 or 2 new opportunities. We need to close the opportunities, but we need very much to maintain those and even grow them. So I basically structured the team so that we actually aligned on not just the outbound or the sales down representatives, all that kind of stuff.
Retainment.
But also, we have a logical life cycle covered by an account management team that was not just doing technical support, but really trying to make sure they get the best value out of it.
Okay. So do you feel that Israel is up to speed? Like, I don't know if you've been around in Israel, of course, already. Do you feel that in sales, the way that the Israeli companies, startups and corporates are building their sales teams, are they coming up to speed with the world? Like in the way you build sales team, or do you feel that are we like in front of people? Are we behind? Where are we?
To be very, very honest, I think we're behind. I think that, again, there's no 100% generic rule, but apply the Pareto 80-20 rule. What I see, when we talk about startup nation and scale up nation, etc., there is no doubt that on the product and technology side, I think we are ahead of the game. There's very clear indicators of that. When it comes to sales and marketing, from my experience and observation, and I've interacted with many small startups, bigger startups, corporations, VCs, etc., I think we are way behind. And I want to say way behind, but we are behind. And when I say that, I'll give you 2 main reasons. First of all, again, going back to it's hard to make the analogy, but to my prior life in Microsoft, when we were building, forget that Microsoft is a very big multi-billion-dollar company. When we were building those teams, for example, when I started the incubation of software as a service, back in 2006, or the first time that Steve Ballmer mentioned software as a service at Microsoft, nobody knew what they were talking about. We were 75 people worldwide running sales, engineering, everything, right? So it was very clear for us that with the few salespeople that we had, we couldn't scale. We couldn't reach a $1 billion revenue. It was obviously not feasible. So by default, we specialized, and my career also eventually specialized, although I sold directly to the customers, in forging strategic alliances. When I say that, it's not just add a logo on your website saying those guys are partners because they're a partner program. That means nothing. What I mean by that is to actually have, going back to Adam Grant, a very clear give and get list that I set to my key partners and says, okay, what do you want to achieve? What do you need from me? This is what I need from you. How can I get this? And have that kind of, not just that conversation once a year, whatever, the Worldwide Partner Conference, but have KPIs and regular cadence of discussions where you actually evolve those needs, be them on training, be them on incentives, etc., And I think that from that respect, I found very few companies in Israel. There are a few, of course, they're already IPO'd or in a very late stage already that have built that capacity. But in more early stage, it's very rare that you have a startup that that has the experience or even the appetite to try and do that, because that takes effort, strategic thinking, long-term commitments. And as you say, in a way, startups are here in early stage are a little bit like the sales guys that you described. They're just looking for the next quarter because the investors want to see the growth. So I'm not going to waste time with this guy who's going to take 12 months to ramp up. Well, guess what? In 2-3 years, if you don't do that now, you're left behind. And if we hadn't done that in Microsoft Azure day one, when I started to work with the system integrators and invested 9-10 months to build those things and programs and things, Azure wouldn't be number 2 now. So I think that's one of the main reasons there's not such a great emphasis on partnerships. And there's others, but I'll leave it at this point. Yeah.
Okay. So this is but I also see another tendency that happens is that Israeli companies, as you say, they build a product, they're amazing in building technology, and then they kind of like they hire when they start selling, and then they always go for the US, of course, as the market, and then they hire someone there, right, who is locally there and can build the relationships there. So it seems like they're basically just outsourcing the sales. Do you see that that's a great strategy, or is it like, does it create too much disconnect with the with the company itself, or?
Look, there is no perfect answer for most things in life, and that's a great question that has many opinions. And of course, the answer is always it depends. But to give you a less wishy-washy answer, I personally see no problem with that. I actually am more concerned about the opposite. I mean, I've experienced, before COVID, amazingly, COVID has been, in a way, a tragedy, but it can also be a blessing for many things. And in this respect, I thought it was a blessing. I've interacted, for example, with a startup here that was helping, which was very adamant that all the team should be based here in Israel, should be in the office and have coffee together and this and that. And while I understand that, being physically present, again, we're talking pre-COVID, and having this bonding relationship can have real benefits, of course. Hence, we have WeWork and co-working spaces and stuff like that. The problem with that is, and I felt that also in a multinational like Microsoft, I was an exception. Like, one of the reasons I think I did relatively well in my career at Microsoft is because I was a corporate guy who was constantly on the road. And I didn't want to offend my colleagues in Redmond, but I said, if I stay too much time in Redmond, I will have less value in the market, because I need to be close to the customers, I need to be close to the partners, I need to be in Denmark, I need to be in Brazil, I need to be in Israel. I don't need to be here in Redmond, Washington, talking to 10,000 Microsofties. And then that goes to everything in life, and in a way, of course, there are challenges in remote monitoring and building the morale of the teams abroad. And I know many companies, without naming here in Israel, that have a big challenging with the employees. You can go to Glassdoor and you'll find that employees in the US are very disconnected from the headquarters in Israel. But you know what? That's something they need to really work on, because if they're not able to monitor teams remotely and deal with different cultures, different time zones, different everything, they will never ever succeed as a global company. And I think that's one of the things that a few companies here in Israel I've seen done really well, but it's not the majority.
Okay, so you touched upon something that's also very relevant, and that is how do you build and how do you network and build new business relationships when in times of Corona? So let's say when you already have a relationship with old customer or old client, then of course it's easy to just go on Zoom and you can continue that. But you can't really replace the physical, being one-on-one on coffee meetings, no matter how technology becomes, right? You can never really replace that, whatever that creates. So how do you do it in Corona times, in online, when you have to create new relationships and new business relationships? How do you reach out? How do you create them? I mean, it's someone, you can't go to the conferences anymore. You can't go to the meetups. You say there's blessings, but I see more minuses than pluses here. Or am I missing something? Is it easier because people are available more?
Yeah. Again, I don't want to be the Pollyanna and only see the positive, but I'm relatively optimistic on that end, and I'll give you some reasons for that. As you said, of course, everything has trade-offs in life, right? And to be very honest with you, pre-pandemic, when I was based in the US, but I had a global role, of course, it's a personal sacrifice to be constantly flying and not be around family, and there's downsides as well. Personally, for my career, I tried to be on the road as much as I could, not because I enjoy collecting miles, but because, as you said, spending a week in Japan or in Korea or in Latin America or in Europe, a week, 2 weeks on the road, when I came back to Redmond, felt to me like 2 or 3 months of learnings, of real accomplishments. And as you say, it's not all the business is done in a business meeting, and sometimes you go for dinner with customers. Every culture is a culture. Europeans, if you're in France, you got to go to the great restaurant and sip the wine and all that. So those things are not to be taken for granted. They are important. Now, that said, I'm also very, I did some personality tests, and it says I'm a pragmatic idealistic. And I tried to understand what the hell, this sounds like an oxymoron. But really, like, I'm an idealistic person. I would love for everyone to love each other and be having integrity and this and that. But the reality is not the case. And as you say, ideally, I would love to be everywhere with everyone. Now, to be more practical, even before COVID, I was managing a team across 6 countries. And no matter the fact that I was flying 75% of the time, I always had people left behind. I had to look out for them on Microsoft Teams and WhatsApp, whatever. And that's just reality. So I think that COVID came to kind of put a bit more pressure on that fact that, yes, ideally it would be in person, face-to-face. But for productivity perspective, to be quite frank with you, sometimes we are, as human beings, are lazy, and we don't do the work required to be productive without actually being physically present. For example, when I was running this e-commerce team across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, I had 104 markets to cover. And we had to optimize. We had people all over the world. There's no way you're going to get together more than once a quarter. And by being a little more planful and organized, something, again, that I think the Israeli companies, with a few exceptions, still have some room to improve. We have to be planful and very good in creativity and being spontaneous, which is wonderful for innovation. But at the end of the day, innovation is also perspiration. You need to persist and be consistent. And it's not just that spike moment, oh, I discovered a light bulb. Well, now you need to produce it. And how do you do that? Well, the Germans did very well in a systematic way. The Americans do very well. And, so I think that's, to answer your question, yes, we can't be in all these conferences. I'm a co-chairman for a Future of Health Summit, which was supposed to happen in April in Bratislava. We had to change it to a digital event, which is not ideal, but we had over 1,000 people who attended. By the way, I was able to bring people that were not going to be able to fly there, regardless of the COVID, to actually join. Great scientists here from Israel, Kira Radovsky from Diagnostic Robotics, Ronen Talbotzer, who works in a great AI startup. And so again, there is always trade-offs in life. But what I'm trying to say is we need to be adaptable. Like, we're in the era that doesn't matter what, it can be the greatest networker in the world. Tomorrow, COVID hits or something else will happen. All of a sudden, you're in the worst, among the worst networks. So you need to be adaptable. And I really think that, on the plus side, I had a lineup of people, to answer your question, that I wanted to network for very practical reasons. Some investors that I had interest in discuss some things, some long list of people. And because all these people were on planes or were on meetings and attending events with 20,000 people, they were not available. All of a sudden, they said, I just cleared my calendar. I have the whole week. When it's good for you, between Monday and Friday. And now I have these 15, 20 minutes calls with people that I had to wait 3 months. And they say, how about Monday? How about Sunday? It just happened in 2 or 3 days. So again, I think it's a matter of being adaptable. If we know how to use, of course, the tools and technologies we have, we're very blessed that we have Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all these technologies today. We can share presentations. We can have a very live discussion. Yes, we cannot hug and tap each shoulders, but we're not supposed to do that now with the 2 meter distance. I think we can be very productive. And again, does it replace the human touch? It will never replace it, but we can use it in a very effective way. And, please God, when things get better, we'll be able to hug and network physically again.
Great. So I want to shift the subject a little bit. And we've been talking a lot about, of course, how you manage relationships with clients. And I think we got a good feeling of that. Like, what about what is your advice for someone junior salesperson starting out in sales development, SDR, or in account management? You build sales teams from scratch. First of all, what are you looking for when you were hiring junior people specifically, and not only junior, but also like a few years more experience? What is your advice for them to looking for jobs and for getting the attention of networking themselves to a job, you could say, just starting out?
Yeah, okay. So I love that question because, again, I'm I don't have any academic background in human resources, but I am very passionate about psychology, and I have a lot of great friends who are experts in organizational structures and that. First of all, especially if you're hiring young talent, as you say, more entry level, kind of more junior roles, so even if it's mid, but not really super senior. Obviously, by default, given the age and the years of experience, you're not necessarily looking for somebody who has done it for, right? I mean, it sounds ironic, but to be honest, it's sad. I have a lot of mentees who come to me, and you know, some Olim and some other people, and say, I'm trying to find a job, and then it's a junior entry level job, but they ask me 5-7 years of experience. I mean, it's surreal. Think about it. It's almost like a joke, but unfortunately, people, that's what they want. They want everything. You know, the word trade-off is not popular, unfortunately, and so, of course, you know, I'll give you a very specific example. When I built this team in 2016 in the Middle East and Africa, I was given a very interesting mission because, to make the story short, we had a very limited funding from the area vice president, who was not coming from corporate, which is moderate, coming from a sales organization. You know, it's a big investment, and they told me, Benny, look, we're going to be very straightforward with you. You're very experienced, etc. You know, there's a joke that goes. I used to work for IBM in Brazil many years ago, and it says, you know, when you call someone, when you have a problem, and you call an expert from IBM, they will send a guy with 25 years of experience or good. And in Microsoft, they send you a 25-year-old. And you know, it's a joke. Maybe it's not very PC, but the bottom line is that we really believe in talent and in potential, and not necessarily on the experience. Of course, there's specific roles that you must have experience as well. So my number one attribute was: is this person self-motivated, right? We have a lot of people who, regardless of culture or personality, you know, they kind of want to do the job and get their payment, but they're not necessarily like really passionate and into it. And that's a challenge because if they already have all the skills, they will probably do it easily. But if they have to really ramp up quickly in the current demands, that's a challenge. So self-motivation. The number two is adaptability, right? I mean, I was talking to somebody else this morning. In the past, you had all these top 10 attributes for getting hired, and you can look at that in the World Economic Forum. 2020, the number one is adaptability. It doesn't matter that you're great at networking, at computer stuff, whatever it is. If you're not adaptable, you'll be obsolete in 5 years or less. And then combined that, they're all related, but it's also being coachable, right? And in that respect, young people sometimes, even though there's all these stereotypes of millennials, etc., they have their strong opinions. But if you are a good coach, they might argue with you, they might challenge you, and I had a lot of them. My team was very, very young. But in general, it will be a productive discussion, more like the style we have here in Israel, where everybody challenges everyone, but in the end, we learn and grow. And so I think those are like the main attributes. I think to summarize it, they have to be a fast learner, they have to have their own energy and drive, and they need to be think on their own, but also absorb very quickly. I think that's the main. I mean, there is no real rocket sciences. None of us was born knowing computer science or knowing how to sell or knowing how to network, and we all learned it. So I think the ability to learn fast and be self-critical, that to me, that's the other one that sometimes is missing. Can you be self-critical? Are you humble? Because you know, if you reach a point where you now think you know your job very well and you become slightly arrogant, slightly defensive, that can become a real challenge, even if you're very qualified.
And so what is a good advice for you to for someone applying then to show that he's fast learner, to show that he's adaptable? How can he proactively show you that? I assume that you have a gut feeling of whether he's that kind of person after a conversation with him, but is there something he can do to kind of like, you know, show it in his application form already, in his CV, or in the way he does anything, or the way he starts an interview with, or is there any way you can do that?
Yeah, I have a very strong opinion on that one. There's a long list. You can Google all the advice. There's many things people will tell you. In my opinion, in my experience, not just my opinion, it's the intellectual curiosity, and not just the curiosity, but the actual effort put into research and analysis. When I say research and analysis, not just Google and find an article, is think about it. So I'll give a specific example. And I've told people that some people resisted to the idea. They say, come on, they're applying to 10 different jobs. And I was interviewing many people, by the way, when I left Microsoft. And some people came and they clearly didn't know exactly who you are, what you do, what the company does, what the job is about. And of course, you're coming from the outside. You can and you should have a few questions. But we have Google, we have Bing, we have lots of Yahoo search, we have anything, right? So we live in a world where no information is not an excuse. We actually have an abundance of information. We have very limited insights, and sometimes that's a different discussion. But I think the people that are more attracted to personally, not physically, of course, but on a professional level, they do their homework. They show their commitment, not with words. I'm a great learner. Based on what? What do you mean by that compared to what? But the candidates that impressed me were the ones that came and said, look, I see that you've done X and Y and Z, and my understanding is the company's at this stage, and you already have this amount of people doing blah. And my understanding is based on what I read in this article that you're trying to get into this market. And I think someone like me could fit in by doing blah. Is that a fair assumption, or can you elaborate more on that? Now, I love those questions because it means you've done your homework, you actually genuinely care, and moreover, you've thought about it, and you've thought about how you fit into that picture, and now you're bringing to me a productive discussion. Now, if you come to a company, and it sounds obvious, but some people unfortunately do that, and ask the very most basic question that you can just go on their homepage or the website and you see, like, what are your solutions? What are your top verticals? Well, they're probably listed on my website. So if you didn't take the chance to do that, how can I trust you that in 90 days or whatever your onboarding period is, you ramp up quickly? Because you could already have read my website before coming here. And so again, I think it's not an excuse that people are overwhelmed and have a lot of different job opportunities. If you really genuinely care about it, you'll find the time. Bill Gates has 24 hours a day. You and I have 24 hours a day. Barack Obama, Benjamin Netanyahu, anybody has 24 hours a day. So use your time wisely and show it. Like the real value you create is the best impression you put, the professionalism, and I think preparation is key. If you come prepared to a meeting, you look really professional, you look sharp, you look like you can really add value. And if you come completely unprepared, that doesn't show any commitment, and commitment is key.
Okay, and it doesn't matter if you suggest something that's like I could imagine you're challenged in this and this area, and I think that I could make a contribution. If you're completely wrong, like you know what I mean? You can make a suggestion, and it's like, no, we don't have a challenge in that area. You're assuming wrong, but it's not a problem, right? It's like it's okay to be wrong in your assumptions. Just the fact that you're thinking about it, right? That's the whole issue.
Exactly. That's how scientific thinking evolves, right? And even Talmudic studies, you're not supposed to just read and say that's it. You're supposed to think and ask constructive questions, and that's how you learn.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit also about technologies, like how you manage your relations on day to day. Do you have a personal CRM system, or is it more like manually?
Yeah, that's a shaming question, but I will answer you. I think, to be honest, throughout my career, I've learned lots of things, and I know I have my own gaps. I have great mentors and people who helped me in my career. One of my biggest personal challenges was time management. There's just so much to learn and absorb, so many people to talk to, and I'm relatively organized, but I don't think I'm in the top quadrant for that, or I wasn't at least, and I had to learn. So I don't. The short answer is I don't have a CRM system, which is a shame. I should have, by the way. But I do have something that sounds quite silly, and people ask me that. I have mentees, how do you manage your time, prioritize this, that? I manage my. It sounds a bit ugly to say, but I manage my life through Outlook. Whatever tool you use, if you use Google Mail, whatever, it's fine. I use Outlook, and I learned a simple technique, which at first I thought it was absolutely pathetic and ridiculous, and I use it today, since, I don't know, more than 10, 15 years ago, which I learned in training at Microsoft, and it was color code system. So what I do is, I determine for myself some high-level goals. For example, let's create some hypothetical example. I want to be in touch with the investment, those are actually your examples, with the VC community. So I set a goal that, X hours a week or a month, I'm going to network with VCs or whatever those things are, and I have a few categories. I have the time for learning. I want 2 hours a week at least, or whatever, to do training on LinkedIn or something, read an article, study something. So I have actually those high-level goals. Of course, they're not by exact minutes.
So you block off time.
Yeah, and I block those times. I have color codes, And throughout the week, of course, life happens, and I need to move things and change it. But the following week, I always look like, how am I doing? Like if it was 20% go and I did 15%, it's fine. But if I didn't do it all, the networking thing that I planned to do, well, maybe I should go more this time. So I try and use that protocol because it's visual. I don't need to go in a detailed analytics tool and then many, but I can actually look and say, holy shit, I'm spending too much time studying and not that much time networking or whatever that is, or exercising, and include even personal things there. And that's how I manage it. It's very visual. There are great tools. I use the Microsoft also for more specifically say how much time I spend on email or social media. Those are also useful, but I honestly don't look at them so often. But my calendar is my life. I wake up, am I managing my time well? Do I have enough time to do things this week? Shall I do something different next week? And that's how I manage.
I see so many job positions where they write native English or native English level a must. So how do you convince the company to give you attention, even if your English is pretty good, but it's just not native levels?
Yeah, again, language is very important, as we all know. It's not the only thing, right? I mean, I've done business in many countries where I don't speak language. I went to Denmark and I went to France, which is particularly hard if I don't speak French. Would that have been better if I spoke the language? For sure, it will always be. But there are ways you can do it, especially if you have another language that you both speak decently, like English. The magic formula, again, I think is for any job. Let's put the language aside. It's unrealistic. It's like a shit or matching dating in real life, right? You will never find that person that's 100% everything's perfect. It doesn't exist. And if it exists, probably run away. You're marrying yourself. So get rid of your ego. But in all seriousness, I think that in any case, even if you're fluent in 4 or 5 languages, you will always, when you look at a job description or whatever it's expected from you, which might be different than the job description, by the way, there will be gaps. There will be gaps. And I'll give a particular example, and it's not related to language, but you can use language as a variable. It doesn't matter. I come from a family of doctors. My dad's a physician. I grew up surrounded by doctors. My sister and I wanted to find a cure for cancer and be researchers and whatever. Both of us failed to receive blood. So we realized, wow, that would be a disaster if we pursue that career. We're never going to make any money. She's a lawyer. She works for the police in Brazil. I'm a computer engineer. I work in business. But eventually, I found my way into Microsoft research, my dream job, which was in the health solutions group. And it was building technology for health. Now, it all sounds great, but when I looked at the job description, there were 10 attributes and qualifications. 9 of them I could elaborate on how great my experience and my skills would fit. The 10th one explicitly said 10 years of healthcare IT experience. And I go there and I have like this butterfly in my stomach. I'm shaking a bit and I think, I really want this job. It's my dream. And my manager, to become a manager, was a really nice guy, an American guy, had experience. And at the end, the interview was going very well. So Pio looks at me and goes through his checklist and says, okay, so how many years of healthcare IT experience you have? And he's hoping, I'm going to say 13, 15, something like that. And I tell him, FS, 0, nothing, nada. And he's looking at me like I'm in some sort of weird, awkward moment, like, is this a joke or real? And I told him, listen, Bill, I've shown you that I've got 90% of what you need to be successful in this job. I want to learn something new in every job I do. If I was doing this for 10 years, I wouldn't be here. I'll be bored. And as much as I learned many things that I've done in the past, and I showed you the results, and I didn't know those things before, I'm going to learn about the healthcare IT system. I've already bought a book. I'm already talking to doctors and people that I know and who I don't know, and I will learn. But you're going to give me something that I will learn. And so the same analogy applies to, and I got the job, and I did really well, thank God, in that job, but I struggled. I had to learn like 365 pages in 2 weeks, and I did. So I think it's the same, right? If you don't know the language so well, but you can get by, you can tell them, look, maybe I'm not a great speaker, but I can write very well. There's no shortage of tools that can help you correct your grammar. I can take course, and I can do anything. I can be great in graphic design. I can do the best presentations. Whatever, right? You will find your superpowers, whatever those are. Or I have great connections. I know the CEOs of other companies I want to talk to, and I'll speak with them in my broken English or in my own language. Doesn't matter. As long as you are focused on the outcomes, you show them, I will give you those outcomes, even though I don't have all the required qualifications. They will be okay taking the risk, a calculated risk. But you've got to show them the skills and experience you have, such as you really learn fast, you really get core, you really have a great track record of success. And they might give you the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, so I will never find somebody who's 100%. So if you're 90%, I hope you improve your skills in they can even sponsor your course in language, whatever. I think it's very important that you are very transparent. Don't try and say, no, I'm fluent in English and talking about broken English. Explain, I'm at this level, I'm working on it, I have a plan. And I think it's also very important that you say, I know that I'm not there yet, but I have a plan. And I always showed that my boss, here's my 90-day plan to get better at this thing that you need. And I don't I'm here now, but I'll get here. And I need your help with this. And they're very appreciative of that in general, if they're mature and professional.
That's a great advice. That's a great advice. Great way not trick, but a great strategy for getting out of that. There's always going to be that thing. It's going to 10 or 15%. You don't have it.
It is a trick, but it's a trick in a positive way. It's a constructive
ethical trick, you could call it. Right?
It's an ethical or legal trick.
So I have two more questions, and then I think that we're gonna wrap up. But let's say now let's go to the stage where you actually got a job and you're working there, but you want to move up in your career in sales. So of course, how to deal with clients? That's one thing. But how do you create great relationships and network with? You always have to be probably looking out for other opportunities. Also, networking and making yourself attractive for managers higher up, and also for looking for opportunities in other companies. How do you? Do you have some ideas for how someone can do that to advance his career through relationships and not just clients? I mean, corporate colleagues or managers.
Yeah, a couple of them. I mean, one of them is, again, there's always some gray lines, but I consider myself very loyal to my employers. I mean, I worked for myself for 15 years and left and I came back. And but we're in a free market. I mean, people leave for better jobs. Sometimes they go to competitors. As long as you comply with the NDAs and all kind of agreements you have, then it's part of life. But in general, a couple of things I would say. One is, for example, in my case, I was working, as I said, building sales organizations that had to scale the partner ecosystem. So I felt like, although I loved Microsoft and I had a lot of great colleagues, managing partners is a great way. Not only when you work with a client, of course, it's your client, you eventually build a relationship, but it's slightly different. It's customer relationships are a bit different. The partner relationship, which in some cases your customer can also be a partner, are a little bit interesting, and it's, again, there's some gray lines sometimes, but in general, it can also be a great way for you to learn. Like my partners were working, for example, with Microsoft, but with many of my competitors. Not that they were trading any secrets, of course, and had a lot of respect for confidentiality, but in a way, you gain from the broader experience in the ecosystem. They have a better view of the market. They will teach you new things. And I think whether eventually some of them either offered me a job, I ended up turning down, but that's an option. People go to partner organizations, and there's nothing really wrong with that. But in general, they also taught me a lot of things and opened a little bit my mind. That's one thing. The other thing is, just volunteer. Like I believe in volunteering for different reasons. But when you're a volunteer or you're a mentor or whatever you are, you think that initially you're just going to give right back to Adam Grant third time, but you actually get a lot more than you give. And by becoming a volunteer, I'm volunteering in many organizations like Beeny, Product League, Mass Challenge, lots of different organizations. You end up building a great network. You end up meeting other people who actually senior, who are very connected, who might really connect well with you and find you the opportunities. I've been referred to opportunities that without even asking by people who I actually didn't know, but they were on the board of organizations where I volunteer, and they said, okay, maybe that's good for you. So I think that again, when you give and you open a bit and get out of your day by day and you dedicate even 10, 15, 20% of the time, whatever you can, to other causes or organizations, you'll be amazed by how much you learn, how much you gain, how much you broaden your network, even if you're not proactively, like, I got to make 3 calls this week and get to know these people, which nobody likes, very aggressive sales target. But sometimes these people will reach out to you. They say, hey, I see you're Brazilian and you work for this company and I need some advice, and you spend 20 minutes on the phone, and by that, the person will refer you to another great opportunity, or they will, introduce you to somebody that will help you a lot.
Okay. Good. Yeah. The last question I want to go into a little more is it's a different chronological order here, but let's say I'm thinking about when you want to reach out to someone cold. I'm not thinking about a client. I'm not thinking about a customer. That's one thing, of course, making cold calls and cold emails to customers and outbound calls. I'm thinking about more when you're job seeking and you're looking for new job opportunities, employment opportunities, and you kind of like networking cold, you could say, or you're finding someone who's a very interesting profile on LinkedIn and you're reaching out to him. Do you have a formula for how you do it, or
Yeah, I don't have a formula, but I have a few tips or tricks, as you want to say. But one of them is, I mean, personally, I feel comfortable reaching out to people directly. I know in general, if I send request to connect on LinkedIn, first tip that I have is that very few people do, and I know there's some reasons for that. But when I request a connection, I usually write at least 1 or 2 sentences. I get like hundreds of connection requests. I usually accept, but some of them I just don't. I don't know why I should be connected. So at least say, hey, I watched your webinar today. I would love to connect. That's a very easy one that you can do now in COVID, right? Because you go to this webinar. I know people who just go to the webinar not just because they don't want to learn, but they want to connect with the people there, and it's okay. So they say, you know, I saw you there. I want to connect. I want to learn from experience, or you know, if I'm interested, let's say an opportunity with a company XYZ, and I see somebody who worked there in the past. Or who studied the money for whatever it is, you can just say, look, I saw that you worked at this company, so did I, or whatever. Would love to get some perspectives from you. And the person will normally accept a connection, and they will ask, so what can I help you with? And then you can take it from there. So that's one, like give context. Like people are overwhelmed with like requests and stuff, so put some context, like why are you reaching out? You know, there's exceptions for everything, but again, I'm not very keen at just going. I'm a straightforward person, and I get the straightforwardness of Israeli culture. But there's a borderline thing between being direct and being slightly, you know, not so polite or minimal. So I wouldn't go and say, hey, I'm interested in working at this company. Can you get me a job there? I mean, that's too aggressive. But usually when I go and says, look, I think this company is amazing. I've done some related things in the past. Would love to spend 15 minutes with you on the phone to ask a few questions. Okay, you know, not everyone, but many people say, sure, fine, why not? And then you can figure out, you know, there's a fit and there's a job you're interested, you can actually say, again, there's nothing wrong if you directly say, hey, this is the job, can you refer me? But if you don't know the person, have no context, it's a little bit awkward. The other thing related to that is, although I am relatively comfortable going directly to people, if it's somebody that I really don't have a connection and not even a second connection, I would try to find a second connection actually, and I will go to someone that's connected to them, and I will ask them, do you actually know this person? Many people also connected and don't really know them, and if they say, yeah, he's a friend or whatever, I say, do you mind to make me an introduction? And I give them the text, by the way. I don't make them like work for me. I say, I want to say this. I'm Beeny. I would like to ask you blah, blah. Do you mind? They copy paste, they send it, takes them 5 seconds. And the person is more likely to say, okay, I'm hiring for this person who's a friend, and I trust her, and therefore I should answer Beeny. So again, they're just simple things, but just, again, back to the empathy. Think about the other side. If I'm asking somebody to introduce me, keep them the blurb. Don't make them think what you want. And yeah, just as a former manager I had in the US told me once, Beeny, help me help you.
Good. You just could go out there because there was my internet was just got unstable. Why? When you were saying a very important thing, you said that when you reach out and not go straight for, of course, asking, hey, I see there's an interesting job in your company. Reach out and say, you seem like you have an interesting background, an interesting connections. Can we? What's your line? Can you just repeat it?
What I'm saying is, I'm not suggesting that people be too indirect and mysterious, but there's a little bit. It's like flirting, right? You want to be direct, but not too much. So sometimes they say, hey, I see a job at this company. Can you refer me? Okay, if you know the person and you're comfortable, that's okay. If somebody you barely know, I wouldn't go and say, hey, can you recommend me for this job, for example? I would look at their, again, back to the research point again. I would go into their profile and I'll find some commonality. Oh, I see you also speak Spanish and I do speak Spanish. Or I see that you volunteer at this group that I volunteer. Whatever it is, find something of common interest or whatever. And tell them, hey, I observed, or just say, I observed that you have a long career in artificial intelligence. I happen to be passionate and be helping this startup. I wonder if you could spend 15 minutes just giving me sharing some insights with me. You don't need to say exactly what he wants, but why not? I'll find 15 minutes, maybe not now, maybe next week. And then you can, I think it's just more like, it's the art of seduction. Yeah? You give enough information, they'll be intrigued. It's also a sales secret, But you don't need to throw it and say, hey, you want to buy this for this amount of money? It's like, I don't even know who you are. Well, why would you do
that? But in Brazil, you don't go straight up to a woman in Brazil and tell her to marry you, or do you want to go out with me?
Yeah, exactly. So I was doing a conference yesterday, and they asked me, what's your favorite quote? I'm a big fan of quotes, a great collection of quotes, so I don't have only one. But this one that I chose yesterday, it's a long one. It's from Martin Luther King. And it says, if you can't fly, walk. If you can't walk, if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, just keep moving. And I think it's a very powerful one, because before I can fly, I need to know how to crawl. So, maybe take a step at a time, and that's how you get there.
Yeah, amazing. So I think with that, we'll end the interview or the podcast. We were talking for a long time, actually. It's been very interesting. Got a lot of insights, a lot of good tips. I got a lot of mindsets that will be that's useful, especially for Olim, but also for sales, people looking for a career in sales and business development and everything. So thanks a lot for your advice and for your time, Beeny.
You're more than welcome. And again, if I might, just one final piece of advice that you asked me for people entering sales. Again, put kind of a consultant hat, put your customer's hat. Your quota is very, very important. Your product is very important. Your company is very important. But you need to understand what your customers really need, what their pains are. Don't just assume that you have the perfect solution for them if you don't even understand their problems. So, it's okay to position and be assertive, but more important than having the right answers is asking the right questions. So be curious, ask them questions, share insights, do research, share valuable information with them. And as you gain their trust, they'll be more likely to engage in a commercial discussion. So again, part of the tango, yeah. You need to make some moves so they can follow you.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Beeny.